Stop what you're doing. Right now, while you're watching this video, the government just took $1,500 from you. You didn't see it happen. There was no vote. No debate. No consent. They just took it. The Trump tariffs amount to an average tax increase per U.S. household of $1,500 in 2026. But here's the sick part. They're not calling it a tax. They're calling it protection. Protection from what? China? Mexico? Your own wallet? Let me show you what's actually happening. You walk into Walmart. That shirt you bought last year for $20. Now it's $20.60. Those headphones? Up from $50 to $51.50. Your kids' toys. Your groceries. Your electronics. Everything. 3% more expensive. Overnight. Walmart issued a tariff cliff warning, noting inventory buffers are finally exhausted, leading to an immediate 3% jump in general merchandise prices. But wait. It gets worse. Apple, the richest company on earth, is absorbing $800 million to $1.1 billion in tariff costs. Per quarter. Apple reported absorbing between $800 million and $1.1 billion in tariff costs per quarter throughout 2025. You think they're eating that cost out of kindness? No. They're passing it to you. Slowly. Quietly. In ways you won't notice until your credit card bill arrives. And Caterpillar? The company that builds the machines that build America. Caterpillar reported a 9% drop in operating profit due to $1.03 billion in manufacturing cost headwinds directly tied to steel and aluminum tariffs. 9% profit drop. $1 billion in losses. Because of tariffs. That means construction projects cost more. Infrastructure gets delayed. Your roads stay broken. Your bridges stay crumbling. But hey. At least we're protected, right? Wrong. According to the IMF, a universal 10% rise in U.S. tariffs, accompanied by retaliation from the euro area and China, could reduce U.S. GDP by 1% and global GDP by roughly 0.5% through 2026. We're not at 10%. We're at 15%. And other countries are hitting back. Hard. This is economy war. And you're the casualty. Today, I'm going to show you exactly who's robbing you. How they're doing it. And why they're lying to your face about it. Buckle up. This is going to make you angry. February 24, 2026. The day they pulled off the heist. No masks. No guns. Just lawyers and loopholes. Here's how it went down. February 20, 2026. 4 days earlier. The Supreme Court drops a bombshell. In the case of Learning Resources Incorporated v. Trump, the Supreme Court ruled that the administration's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose sweeping, non-emergency tariffs was unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. The Supreme Court said you can't do this. It's illegal. For 96 hours, the markets celebrated. Trade optimists cheered. Businesses breathed. Finally, sanity. Then the pivot. Within 96 hours, the administration utilized Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which allows the president to impose temporary import surcharges of up to 15% for 150 days to address serious balance of payments deficits. They found a loophole. A technicality. A dusty law from 1974 that nobody even remembered existed. And boom. 15% tariff on everything. $1.2 trillion worth of imports. We estimate this new tariff would apply to $1.2 trillion worth of annual imports. Let me put that in perspective. $1.2 trillion. That's more than the entire GDP of Australia. Mexico. Spain. One signature. One executive order. $1.2 trillion in new taxes. But here's the genius of the scam. They call it a temporary tariff. 150 days. 5 months. The tariff is scheduled to expire after 150 days. Don't worry, they say. It's just temporary. To fix our trade deficit. But answer me this: when has a temporary government program ever actually ended? Income tax was temporary in 1913. Still here. Social Security was temporary relief during the Depression. Still here. The Patriot Act was temporary after September 11th. Still here. Temporary in government speak means permanent, but we won't admit it yet. And businesses know this. That's why they're panicking. This legal pivot has kept the market in a state of high anxiety, as the 150-day clock creates a ticking time bomb for importers who must now decide whether to pass costs to consumers or absorb the hit. They have 150 days to decide: do we eat the cost and go bankrupt, or do we pass it to customers and watch sales collapse? Either way, you lose. But wait. There's more. Remember those old tariffs the Supreme Court struck down? The ones they said were illegal? The government already collected them. $130 billion worth. Questions also surround the reimbursement of the tariffs already collected, which stand at around $130 billion for 2025. So here's the question: if the tariffs were illegal, do you get your money back? The Department of Justice has argued that importers must file individual lawsuits to claim reimbursement, and there is no guarantee of an automatic refund process. Translation: we took your money illegally. If you want it back, sue us. Individually. Good luck with that. This is the heist. And they're getting away with it. Let's talk about what this actually means for regular people. The Trump tariffs are the largest U.S. tax increase as a percent of GDP since 1993. Read that again. The largest tax increase since 1993. And it's not being sold as a tax. It's being sold as protecting American jobs. But here's what's actually happening. In 2025, the trade deficit fell by just $2.1 billion compared to 2024. The reduction in the trade deficit was due to an increase in the trade surplus of services, as the goods deficit actually increased by $25.5 billion year over year. Translation: the tariffs aren't working. They're not reducing the trade deficit. They're just making everything more expensive. Let's look at specific impacts. Walmart. America's largest retailer. Walmart recently achieved a historic $1 trillion market cap but issued a tariff cliff warning in its February 2026 quarterly report, noting that inventory buffers are finally exhausted, leading to an immediate 3% jump in general merchandise prices. Your clothes. 3% more expensive. Your electronics. 3% more. Your kids' toys. 3% more. And that's just Walmart. Apple. The world's most valuable company. Despite a massive $500 billion reshoring investment plan to move production to the US, India, and Vietnam, the new 15% universal surcharge continues to pressure margins. Even with $500 billion in reshoring investment, they still can't escape the tariffs. Caterpillar. The industrial bellwether. When Caterpillar struggles, it means construction slows. Infrastructure projects delay. Jobs disappear. And here's the kicker. The permanent tariffs will reduce US GDP by 0.2% before foreign retaliation. Before retaliation. Meaning, this assumes other countries don't fight back. But they are fighting back. Here's what people miss about trade wars. They're not one-sided. When you hit other countries with tariffs, they hit you back. And sometimes harder. Quebec Premier Legault said that the US tariffs could cause the loss of as many as 100,000 Canadian jobs within the province. And Canada isn't taking it lying down. Despite lingering uncertainty, and ongoing pressures on the trade side, we forecast Canadian growth of 1.2% in 2026. But here's the interesting part. In February 2025, Canadian travel to the United States dropped by 40% compared to February 2024. A March 2025 poll found that 62% of Canadians plan to avoid traveling to the US for the next year. The shift in Canadian travel away from the US could amount to an annual loss of $4 billion for the US economy. That's not tariff retaliation. That's consumer boycott. And it's working. The EU threatened the use of its anti-coercion instrument, developed in 2023. That would put financial flows and US services exports at risk. Think about what that means. Not just goods tariffs, but restrictions on US banks, US tech companies, US financial services. In the European Union, economic growth is forecast at 1.3% in 2026, down from 1.5% in 2025, as higher US tariffs and ongoing geopolitical uncertainty dampen exports. In East Asia, growth is projected at 4.4% in 2026, down from 4.9% in 2025 as the boost from front-loaded exports fades. Investors fled the usual safety of the US Treasury bond market for gold. Bond yields rose and the dollar depreciated. Read that carefully. Investors are fleeing US Treasury bonds, the safest asset in the world, for gold. That's not normal. That's a loss of confidence in the US economy. Let's zoom out. Look at the global picture. Global economic output is forecast to grow by 2.7% in 2026, slightly below the 2.8% estimated for 2025 and well below the pre-pandemic average of 3.2%. That might not sound dramatic. But here's the context. Global growth is projected to remain subdued at about 2.6% in 2026, while growth in developing economies excluding China slows to around 4.2%. Developing economies are supposed to grow faster than developed ones. That's how they catch up. But tariffs are killing that growth. For developing countries, slower growth limits investment in infrastructure and industrialization. Economic growth in the United States is projected at 2% in 2026, compared to 1.9% in 2025, supported by monetary and fiscal easing. Barely growing. Despite massive fiscal stimulus. Despite tariff revenues. Output in Japan is expected to expand by 0.9% in 2026, compared with 1.2% in 2025, with a modest domestic recovery partly offsetting weaker external conditions. In South Asia, growth is forecast at 5.6% in 2026, easing from 5.9%, led by India's 6.6% expansion. Still strong. But slowing. In Africa, output is projected to grow by 4% in 2026, marginally up from 3.9% in 2025. However, high debt and climate-related shocks pose significant risks. High debt. Climate shocks. And now, trade war fallout. Here's the UN Secretary-General's assessment. A combination of economic, geopolitical and technological tensions is reshaping the global landscape, generating new economic uncertainty and social vulnerabilities. Many developing economies continue to struggle and, as a result, progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals remains distant for much of the world. Translation: the global economic system is under unprecedented stress. But the slowest killer in this war? Supply chains. Nearly 2/3 of global trade takes place within value chains that are being reshaped by geopolitical tensions, industrial policy, and new technologies. 2/3 of global trade is in value chains. Meaning products aren't made in one country. They're assembled across many countries. Your iPhone. Designed in California. Chips from Taiwan. Assembled in China. Rare earths from Africa. Shipped from Vietnam. Tariffs break that chain. Firms are diversifying suppliers and relocating production closer to key markets to reduce risk. Countries with strong infrastructure, skills and stable policies are better placed to attract investment. More peripheral economies risk being sidelined unless they improve logistics, skills, and the investment climate. Translation: rich countries with good infrastructure will be fine. Poor countries left behind. The uneven reopening of the global economy post-pandemic laid bare the vulnerabilities to trade shocks. Many firms sought more resilient supply chains, reversing a decades-long shift to just-in-time inventory systems. Remember the supply chain crisis of 2021 to 2022? This is worse. Because it's not a temporary disruption. It's permanent restructuring. Frequent policy shifts increase uncertainty, discourage investment and disrupt supply chains. Smaller and less diversified economies are most exposed to rising costs and trade volatility. Companies aren't hiring because they don't know what the rules will be in 6 months. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Inflation. Headline inflation declined from 4% in 2024 to an estimated 3.4% in 2025 and is projected to slow further to 3.1% in 2026. That sounds good, right? Inflation is falling. But here's the catch. While overall inflation has moderated, elevated prices continue to weigh on real incomes. Unlike the globally synchronized surge of previous years, inflation trends have become more uneven, shaped by recurring supply bottlenecks amid rising geopolitical and climate-related risks. Translation: even though the rate of inflation is slowing, prices are still high. And they're not coming down. And tariffs make it worse. Remember, the Trump tariffs amount to an average tax increase per U.S. household of $1,500 in 2026. That $1,500. It's not going to the government as direct tax. It's being passed to you as higher prices. Sustained growth alongside above-target inflation, even as the labor market slows, poses a challenge for the U.S. Federal Reserve. The Fed is trapped. Inflation is above target. But the economy is slowing. Labor market weakening. Normally, they'd cut interest rates to help the economy. But that would make inflation worse. Or they'd raise rates to fight inflation. But that would crash the economy. For the first time in more than 3 decades, multiple federal open market committee members have opposed policy decisions, creating uncertainty. Even inside the Fed, they can't agree on what to do. Following December's cut, we anticipate 2 additional quarter-point rate cuts in the second half of 2026. They're betting on cutting rates. Hoping inflation behaves. Hoping the economy doesn't crash. It's a gamble. Okay. So far, this sounds like everyone loses. But that's not entirely true. Some sectors, some companies, some countries are winning. As of March 2, 2026, the Russell 2000 has outperformed the tech-heavy Nasdaq by nearly 9% over the last 30 days, as investors flee multinational giants with high exposure to foreign manufacturing in favor of companies that stand to benefit from domestic reshoring. Small-cap domestic manufacturers are outperforming big tech. Why? Because tariffs help them. Less foreign competition. But there's a problem. The majority of AI data center inputs, like chips, are produced outside of the US. Those could increase revenue significantly if they were to be tariffed. However, that could stall the AI build-out. The AI boom, the one thing keeping US growth positive, depends on foreign chips. Tariff those, and the AI boom stops. The administration and those before it view AI as one of the best potential drivers of future economic growth and, more importantly, of military development. So they can't tariff chips. Even though that would generate massive revenue. That's the contradiction at the heart of this whole strategy. IT investment as a share of U.S. economic output has surged to the highest level since 2001, providing a major boost to overall business investment and activity. Tech investment is booming. Data centers. AI infrastructure. Cloud computing. Although this IT surge has been concentrated in the United States, it is also generating positive spillovers globally, most notably to Asia's technology exports. So even in a trade war, tech is growing. For now. But here's the warning. With asset valuations stretched, debt financing on the rise, and uncertainty elevated, strong prudential oversight is essential to safeguard financial stability. Translation: we might be in a tech bubble. And if it pops, there's nothing to catch the fall. Investors fled the usual safety of the U.S. Treasury bond market for gold. Gold is winning. Because it's the only thing people trust when everything else is uncertain. So where does this go from here? The tariff is scheduled to expire after 150 days. That's roughly July 2026. Will they expire? Or be replaced with something permanent? Nobody knows. If the court declares the tariffs unlawful, the Trump administration could lose the authority to collect duties and might need to return revenues already received. We estimate measures account for roughly 61% of the year-to-date increase in U.S. tariffs, or about $180 billion on an annualized basis. $180 billion in tariffs. If the courts strike them down, does the government refund that money? Questions also surround the reimbursement of the tariffs already collected, which stand at around $130 billion for 2025. While the Court of International Trade ruled that all such tariffs should be refunded, the Department of Justice has argued that importers must file individual lawsuits to claim reimbursement, and there is no guarantee of an automatic refund process. In other words, good luck getting your money back. With the Congressional Budget Office projecting a federal budget deficit averaging 5.6% over the next 5 years, any administration will find it difficult to abandon this policy tool. Here's the brutal truth. The U.S. government needs the money. The deficit is 5.6% of GDP. They can't afford to give up tariff revenue. So even if the courts strike down current tariffs, new ones will appear. We expect the average effective U.S. tariff rate to exceed 10% for most countries through the forecast period, well above the 2% rate at the start of 2025. This is the new normal. 10% plus tariffs. Permanently. The tariffs could affect negotiations on renewing the USMCA, for which a review is due in 2026. USMCA, the trade agreement between U.S., Mexico, Canada. Up for renewal in 2026. Right in the middle of this trade war. If that falls apart, North American trade collapses. Let me bring this home. We are in an economic war. Not a metaphor. An actual economic war. $1,500 average tax increase per U.S. household in 2026. $1.2 trillion worth of imports now facing 15% tariffs. $130 billion in tariffs already collected in 2025. Global growth down to 2.7%, well below pre-pandemic 3.2%. Universal 10% tariff with retaliation could reduce U.S. GDP by 1%. Walmart raising prices 3%. Apple absorbing $1 billion in tariff costs per quarter. Caterpillar losing 9% of operating profit. 100,000 potential Canadian job losses. $4 billion loss from reduced Canadian tourism. Domestic U.S. small manufacturers for now. AI and tech sector but vulnerable. Gold as safe haven. Will tariffs expire in July or become permanent? Will courts force refunds of $130 billion? Will USMCA collapse? Will the AI bubble pop? Will inflation resurge? Here's the bottom line. Global growth has been impressively resilient amid trade disruptions, but this masks underlying fragilities tied to the concentration of investment in the tech sector. And the negative growth effects of trade disruptions are likely to build up over time. We're resilient now. But the damage is accumulating. Like a slow-motion car crash. The challenge for policymakers and investors alike is to balance optimism with prudence, ensuring that today's tech surge translates into sustainable, inclusive growth rather than another boom-bust cycle. What can you do? Understand this affects you, your prices, your job, your investments. Prepare for continued inflation in consumer goods. Diversify, don't be all in on U.S. assets. Watch the 150-day deadline in July 2026. Stay informed, this is changing weekly. This is Economy War. And whether you're paying attention or not, you're on the battlefield. That if you found this valuable, like and subscribe. Comment your thoughts. Are tariffs protecting jobs or destroying the economy? Stay informed. Stay rational. Stay prepared.